What if I told you that the first Martian colonists might face the most complex tax nightmare in human history? While SpaceX and NASA are racing to get us to the red planet, nobody's talking about the IRS following us there. Today, we're diving into the mind-bending world of interplanetary taxation. And trust me, this gets wild fast. Picture this. You're living in a dome on Mars, mining resources, earning income, and suddenly you realize you might owe taxes to 3 different entities: Earth governments, Martian authorities, and potentially international space organizations. This isn't science fiction anymore. With serious Mars colonization plans underway, tax experts are already grappling with questions that sound like they're straight out of a sci-fi movie. The first major issue is determining tax residency. Currently, your tax obligations depend heavily on where you physically reside and earn income. But what happens when you're 140 million miles away from any earthly tax office? The traditional concept of territorial taxation falls apart when your territory is literally another planet. Under current U.S. tax law, American citizens are taxed on worldwide income regardless of where they live. This means if you're an American colonist on Mars, the IRS could theoretically still expect their cut of your Martian mining profits. But enforcing this becomes practically impossible. How do you audit someone on Mars? How do you collect taxes from a planet with no banking infrastructure connected to Earth? The situation becomes even more complex when we consider that Mars colonies will likely be international ventures. Imagine a research station funded by NASA, the European Space Agency, and private companies, with residents from dozens of countries. Whose tax laws apply? What if a German engineer and a Japanese scientist start a business together on Mars? Which country gets to tax their profits? Then there's the question of what constitutes income on Mars. Traditional Earth-based income like salary and investment returns are straightforward. But what about resources you extract from Martian soil? If you discover a deposit of rare minerals, who owns it? Is it taxable income the moment you extract it, or only when you sell it? And to whom would you sell it? Other colonists, Earth-based companies, or a future Martian government? The timing of taxation presents another fascinating puzzle. Earth operates on a 24-hour day cycle for tax purposes, but Mars has a 24-hour and 37-minute day. Mars years are nearly twice as long as Earth years. Do Martian colonists file tax returns based on Earth years, Mars years, or some hybrid system? This might sound trivial, but it could significantly impact when income is recognized and taxes are due. Currency issues add another layer of complexity. Mars colonies will likely operate on some form of digital currency or credit system initially. How do you value Martian currency against Earth currencies for tax purposes? What exchange rate do you use when there's potentially months of communication delay between planets? These valuation questions could create massive discrepancies in tax obligations. Property ownership on Mars opens up entirely new categories of tax considerations. Earth-based property taxes are typically assessed by local governments based on property value and location. But who has the authority to assess property taxes on Mars? If you own a pressurized habitat dome, is it real estate or personal property? What about the land underneath it? Can anyone actually own Martian land according to current international space law? The Outer Space Treaty of 1967 states that no country can claim sovereignty over celestial bodies, including Mars. This means there's currently no legal framework for anyone to own Martian real estate, which makes property taxation seemingly impossible. However, as colonies become permanent and self-sustaining, pressure will mount to establish property rights and corresponding tax systems. Estate planning and inheritance taxes become particularly strange on Mars. If a colonist dies on Mars and leaves assets both on Mars and Earth, which jurisdiction handles the estate? The delays in communication and transportation between planets could create bizarre situations where someone's Earth-based assets are distributed before their Martian assets are even properly inventoried. Business taxation on Mars raises questions we've never had to consider. What if you start a company on Mars that provides services to Earth customers via internet? Is that Martian income or Earth income? What about a company that mines resources on Mars but sells them exclusively to Earth markets? The source of income rules that work on Earth become meaningless when dealing with interplanetary commerce. Employment taxes present their own unique challenges. Social Security and Medicare taxes are designed to fund Earth-based social programs. Should Martian colonists pay into systems they can't practically access? Conversely, what social safety net exists for Martian residents? Who funds Martian health care, disability insurance, or retirement benefits? Sales and consumption taxes could actually be easier to implement on Mars than income taxes. Mars colonies will likely have controlled economies where most transactions flow through central systems. It would be relatively simple to implement consumption taxes on goods and services within the colony. However, this creates potential double taxation issues if colonists are also subject to Earth-based tax obligations. The enforcement mechanisms we rely on for Earth-based taxation simply don't exist for Mars. Wage garnishment, asset seizure, and bank account freezes become impossible when the taxpayer is on another planet. This could lead to Mars becoming an unintentional tax haven, which would certainly capture Earth government's attention quickly. International tax treaties will need complete overhauls to address interplanetary scenarios. Current treaties prevent double taxation between Earth countries, but they don't contemplate taxation across planets. New agreements will need to address which planet has primary taxing rights over various types of income, and how to prevent conflicts between Earth and Mars tax systems. The psychological and political implications of interplanetary taxation could be massive. Mars colonists might develop a strong independent identity and resist Earth-based taxation without Earth-based representation or services. This could lead to the first interplanetary tax revolts in human history. Remember, the American Revolution started partially over taxation issues, and Mars colonists would have even less connection to their Earth-based governments. Some experts predict that Mars colonies will eventually develop their own taxation systems independent of Earth. A Martian government would need revenue to fund essential services like life support maintenance, medical facilities, and infrastructure development. Martian taxes might focus heavily on resource extraction and consumption, rather than traditional income models. Looking toward solutions, some propose creating special international tax zones for space colonies, similar to how some Earth jurisdictions handle offshore financial centers. Others suggest that space colonists should be exempt from Earth taxes after establishing permanent residency on Mars, similar to how some countries treat immigrants. The reality is that we're approaching an unprecedented situation where human civilization will span multiple worlds for the first time in history. Our tax systems, built for a single planet species, will need fundamental reimagining. This isn't just an academic exercise. Companies and governments are already starting to address these questions as Mars missions move from science fiction to concrete planning. As we stand on the brink of becoming an interplanetary species, the humble question of who pays taxes where becomes one of the most complex challenges we'll face. The first Mars colonists won't just be pioneers of space exploration. They'll be guinea pigs for the most complicated tax experiment in human history. And honestly, that might be the most terrifying part of the whole Mars colonization project.